Alex, Donald Trump had a phone call with European leaders. He said it was a tough, call. He was, directly talking to them. It seems that the nature, the tone of the talks were not that much, you know, friendly. But when it comes to the way that Donald Trump and his administration is, communicating with Europeans, do you think that they're doing this in a proper way? Because I don't see you've mentioned how the Trump administration can put a lot of pressure on these European leaders. Who are these people? Macron, 11% of people in France, Starmer, Merz, they have a lot of leverage to put pressure on them. But you don't see that coming. I see even in the Russian, the people in Russia, the leadership, they're so much confused the way that Donald Trump is dealing with European. Why is that?
I think that of necessity, Trump has to, because these are these are American former allies, and we have to keep in mind that Trump hasn't been in the White House a full year yet. This is a relatively new administration. There's a lot of entrenched thinking, legacy relationships and bonds between individuals and institutions on both sides of the Atlantic, and you can't just overturn it all in one fell swoop. Not only that, they knew that Trump was coming back for some times, or they thought that he might, and Trump proofed a lot of these relationships and ongoing projects and contracts and plans. And so Trump couldn't come out day one and say, okay, we're exiting NATO, we're pulling out all the troops, we're no longer going to be allies with these Europeans, and we're going to be best friends with the Russians and Vladimir Putin. That's that's like moving the furniture in the house of blind. It's so it seems to me that his approach has been very, let's call it, asymmetric. He's doing something that appears to be something else, and then only after a while you realize, okay, this is why they did this. This is why they said this. And I believe this to be the case since the start, but I was also thrown off a couple of times, and I have to say I'm still thrown off by the questions of, let's say, Venezuela and Argentina. I still don't understand what the hell they're doing there. But the Operation Rough Rider, when they started bombing Yemen, I thought that was extremely bizarre. So off the charts stupid that it couldn't possibly be what they were saying that it was. Then the fake war on Iran. Then all these statements of like, oh, I'm terribly disappointed with Vladimir Putin. Okay, that's it. We break off. Alaska is dead. We had that for a few weeks that everybody was saying Alaska is dead. The opportunity was missed. So for some reason, he feels that he has to do things this way, and he may be right. But as a result, a lot of us are guessing like what is going on. And then practically in everything they do, in every post, press release, in every document, there's a little bit of everything for everybody, because if you want to read this national security strategy document, you'll find very encouraging things in there, and you'll find very discouraging things as well. There's the military industrial complex there that expect their $1 trillion budget will be growing every single year. They expect this. And if you tell them, no, we're going to cut the budget in half, they're going to want you dead. There's the, making America healthy again, which is, potentially very bad for the big pharma. So they might want him dead too. NATO, now it looks like the United States, it might very soon pull out from the NATO alliance. Those people are going to want him dead as well. And so I think that explains the way they're dealing. And look, even these last, like 10 days ago, when Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were in Moscow, people have to ask themselves, why did he send Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to Moscow? Why didn't he send Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State? That should be his job. Well, obviously, because he can't trust those people. He's sending people that he trusts personally. So that tells you how threatened he might feel and how fragile his whole agenda is, that he can't have Marco Rubio do his job because he feels it'll be scuttled, it'll be throttled in some way. So he sends his friend Steve Witkoff, who so far has been reliable and appears to be a well-meaning, decent man, and has done the job so far. So I think that this is the answer, that Trump is acting kind of under siege, with probably a certain sense of deep insecurity about people that surround him, not being able to know 100% whom to trust, who's loyal, who's not loyal, who's working for the other side. I think this is why even the Russians can't tell.
What Europe, in my opinion, fails to understand is that the United States has totally changed, or the whole world has totally changed comparing to what it was before the war in Iraq and Afghanistan breaking out. You remember, well, General Wesley Clark, he was, saying that, why are we going to Iraq and Afghanistan or even Libya or all these countries? Said that we are big, we have a lot to spend there. Right now, the United States is not in the same position anymore, and Europe doesn't understand it. That's why the United States doesn't want the continuation of the conflict in Ukraine. It's not even Iraq and Afghanistan, it's Russia,
Yeah. But you see, I think that the Europeans, and we have to say primarily we should be talking about the British foreign policy establishment, they don't care. They don't need to win wars. What they need is to keep the key regions of the world perpetually destabilized, because so long as they're destabilized, they always have the opportunity to go in there with their diplomats, with their intelligence agencies, with their NGOs and charities and media organizations and so forth, and like a parasite, penetrate the system and spread their influence and maneuver them to their advantage. And they're doing that everywhere, except they can't do it in Iraq, in Iran, they can't do it in Russia, they can't do it in North Korea, they can't do it in China. So these countries, and I don't know if they can do it in Venezuela. That's like an open question. But this is why these countries are now at the targets of the empire. And if they can't win over by these covert means and through their soft power, then the United States has to be there to start dropping bombs and send special forces and things like this. And so once the United States says, okay, I'm done, I'm not doing this for you anymore, they all lose their minds because they don't have other ways of doing it. Well, they apparently, the British intelligence networks control most of the jihadi forces around the world, and they probably control most of these neo-Nazi militias and battalions in Ukraine. So once they lose in Ukraine, probably they'll try to extract most of them elsewhere to terrorism and sabotage and assassinations around Europe and the United States and wherever else they need them. But this is not a military. You can burn things up. You can assassinate leaders here and there. You can cause terror attacks. Like in Europe in the 1970s and 1980s, you had Operation Gladio being run by NATO. But as far as we knew, these were far left communist militias and terror organizations. But it was all run by NATO, and we know that now for sure. So I think that they will try to reconstitute this. But still, if you're going to take down Russia, you're going to need bigger caliber weapons. And I think that at this moment, the only place that's available is the United States, and Trump is not willing. And so these people are very, very hysterical, very angry, and very confused because they don't know what to do. There's no plan B.
I think the key is the British and the British government, because looking at what's going on in Israel, you would ask yourself, what does Israel have to do with the conflict in Ukraine? Why are all these Zionists in the United States are all supporting Ukraine?
Yes.
This is the key. Who's behind this? What is your understanding of that, Alex?
My strong suspicion is that it's the British who are behind Israel, that it's the British who are behind Zelensky and behind all the neo-Nazi militias and brigades and battalions that are active in Ukraine. And this is why they have so much in common, why the Israelis support Ukraine, why Ukrainians supported HTS when they broke into Syria and took down Bashar al-Assad government. They brought their drone operators because they had all these soldiers who knew how to fly those FPS and other types of drones. So it's all connected. You see, I always go back to 2021 speech by George Soros at Davos, where he says, what we're witnessing in the world today is the clash between two systems of governance. And so Israel, Ukraine, Syria, they're just different battlegrounds of the same war. It's the war between the global empire, the rules-based global order, and everybody else. Soros says open societies versus closed societies, but in reality, it's the world empire against everybody else, whether it's democracies, autocracies, dictatorship. It doesn't matter if either you're their vassal or you're their enemy. And so everybody who's not their vassal is their enemy, which is, again, Russia, Iran, North Korea, China. They're smaller enemies, but they're not so bothered because, once you're rid of Russia, then it's much easier for Iran to fall. And you can then use Russia against China in the same way that you use Ukraine against Russia. This is what they do. This is how they do it. And so this is the conflict, and this is what connects them, because otherwise, it's very, very strange to explain why such a small country with a small military, which is basically geared for anti-insurgency warfare, whose economy is practically broken, whose social services are practically disintegrated, surrounded by, enemy nations, active on 7 war fronts at the same time. How are they so powerful? How do they have these irresistibly powerful lobbies in Europe, in the UK, and in the United States, that they appear to have all the politicians wrapped around their fingers? That's not, the explanation, the Jews, they're better organized and there's many wealthy Jews, so that's why. I don't think that's the truth. There's many wealthy Russians, and there's many wealthy Arabs, and there's many wealthy Africans and Indonesians and South Americans. What sets this group apart? And I think that it's what sets them apart is that they enjoy the cooperation of British, American, Israeli, and German and French intelligence networks, that they are that they enjoy the support of the media that are also under the control of this global imperial establishment, and that they are networked in through all the methods that the British have traditionally used, i.e., charities, NGOs, media company, public relations companies, lobbyists, and so on and so forth. I think this is the key to their power, and that always traces back to London. It's not that little Israel there controls everybody else. It's London that always works through proxies and empowers these proxies with the deliberate objective of hiding their hand. Because otherwise, if everybody saw that, is the British behind the war between Saudi Arabia and Yemen? Is the British who are behind Turkey when they took down Bashar al-Assad? It's the British who are behind Israel, Myanmar, India, Pakistan, everywhere. Then people will say, okay, look, sanction these people to death, blockade the island, expel all the diplomats, everybody, and let's put an end to it. No, they have to hide their hands. So they always, even in the Balkans that I've observed, basically they'll set up NGOs in Croatia, they'll set up NGOs in Serbia, and then Serbian NGOs will fund provocations and sabotage actions in Croatia. And then Croatians figure it out and they say like, it's the Serbians who are doing this to us. And then, they have NGOs in Croatia who fund provocative actions against the Serbs. And then the Serbs investigate and they find like, it's the Croatians who are doing this to us. And next thing you have the two fighting. It's like the old Irish proverb. If you see two neighbors fighting in the morning, you can be sure that one of them had dinner with an Englishman. Unfortunately, this is unfair to, the 99% of British people who are decent, who are just like everybody else. But their establishment has been the epicenter of the poison that's been infecting the whole of humanity for over a century now.